Hi everyone and welcome to Regine's podcast. Hope, faith, and above all, the resulting peace. Over the mountains of human folly lies what we call faith. A strange introduction for those who believe that God is a pure invention to entertain believers. And that's precisely by making them believe that they are nothing more than puppets in a world that is meant to be quite strange when madness has been lurking in it for decades. But now the light is rising again in the West, in that strange land called America, a land so gigantic that not even newborn cherubs could cover it in a single night. But it's clear that something is changing out there. Something strong, something new, even for my post apocalypse generation, lulled by the light of the American hero, when all we've ever known is war and misinformation in general. But it's clear that something else is waking up over there. And it's not Batman, the raving lunatic, or the much more polished and true to his image of a hero destined for man's folly, that is, Superman. Because of super, there is only faith to get out of all these grotesque enormities that have turned us into senseless beings, leaving us to be dominated by the madness of the dictator of all kinds when it comes to transhumanism to be propagated everywhere. We've followed the American model here in France, this country that I no longer know to be free of anyone or anything. So many artists are silenced by the mere fact of thinking for themselves without even incriminating this or that political foundation. What kind of country is this, where a Saturday's night laughter with friends turns into a nauseating evening where not a word should sound higher than the other? It's so hard to believe that here, in this secular country, faith has almost become a flaw, so as not to hurt those who believe in nothing. But what's to stop me or many other people from believing in something greater, something more integrated into our DNA than an equally intrusive injection in the end? So, what's happened? If not this famous replacement of faith in mankind and its creator by an inordinate belief in science and its mysteries. And what mysteries they are! When we see today that only money and lucrative contracts to gorge oneself on the money of death have replaced any kind of consideration for the human being. So, once again, we had to wait for hope to come from the West and finally from the East, when two big entities like China or Portugal left the way clear for two men to finally bring peace to the negotiating table. It's about time this word made its appearance in the major newspapers of humanity's treachery, to understand that it's impossible to escape what the Creator wishes to restore to our beautiful planet. It's about universal balance, the one that allows us to eat, drink, and free ourselves from our fears, to create a more beautiful world that meets the expectation of humanity itself. Indeed, eating insects and undergoing genetic modification is not exactly a good idea if we are to maintain the right civilizational balance in the future. But yes, a handful of affluent people think they are as safe from the world as we poor humans who supposedly understand nothing of the world around us. But then again, that's where they're wrong, because the truth is not a stage now that peace arrives through the spyglass of the Oval Office and its famous red phone. A device with a direct link to the precursor of madness not divinized to excess by scientists with no name to remember in the future. I'm talking about the beautiful Russian steppe that joins forces with the Grand Canyon of Reason to Lose No More in these huge, unexplored spaces of today's great nonsense. So, we need to reason in peace in the days ahead to understand that the light is taking over the elevator shaft, but without the elevator itself. It will fall until it crashes at the feet of the man who kept his faith, and above all, had the courage not to entrust it to the wrong dictator when it came to have blessings. For it took courage not to be fooled by the pious image of the sacrosanct healer working selflessly to save man and humanity as a whole. But what many will have learned is that the Savior is not a stranger at our door, but the one we decide to become for ourselves. And in this respect, faith, at least for me, has been a great help. I haven't given up because I've never been alone, never been left to my own devices by the failing system of my local hospital, to ignore my suffering and the truth of a science. A science that was just and inaccurate, by the way, when it came to seeing the side effects of the absurd mass of vaccinations that were almost compulsory for many women, men, and even children. These children, who, in spite of themselves, have had to give in to the belief of the strongest of hucksters, so that they too can now seek faith in something that makes sense for the future. And that's how I wanted to conclude this little podcast dedicated to faith for my compatriots in a country I called the world. For it was created for all and by the will of an energy far more beautiful than the administrative regulator of all these countries, united in administrations as heavy as they are gargantuan, feeding on the misfortune of those they are supposed to serve. So, here it is, dear friends. I invite you to the table of peace to finally build what the last president and the one who has always lived said long before we knew we were souls in flesh and blood incarnated on a soil of all surprises. We must never seek fear or decadence, but rely on the faith of our being, for all the answers are within us, whether we want them or not. I also wanted to thank the universe for helping me give all these beautiful words of peace to whoever wants to hear them. Because sometimes it's good to thank the invisible to benefit from its returns of service in a very real matter, this one. And please, don't tell me that everything we're going through right now is due to chance. For the latter has a way of regularly replacing the word universe, or God, or Jesus, or whoever speaks to you most of his superior being energy. The one whose words are always wise if you take the time to read them and understand them as a message of peace, and not as an order to act to eradicate a civilization that isn't in the image of one thought up by a dictator or another. That's all for today. Have a good week under the sun of the reform most awaited by all those who fight to denounce this false God who wanted to annihilate our thinking, our knowledge of ourselves, and cut us off from the faith that has animated us for so long. I'm talking, of course, about fear, inculcated as a divinity to be respected in order to please these demons, who will now call fearful themselves. Indeed, how can we describe someone who doesn't know how to live in peace with his fellow human beings, and so wants to destroy them at all costs? May God bless you, and may peace return to the tables of all possible negotiation in this world. Ready, I think, to move on to renewal. See you soon!